Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about Guardian Challenge, which is a league-wide game mode, and I've seen a lot of new players ask about how it works. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any game footage to show you right now, but I do think we can kind of go through the rules and I can give you a basic overview about how everything works and maybe clear up some confusion around some of the mechanics. So some basic information about the setup. You're going to need an R4 or better officer of your league to join up with Guardian Challenge. There are 4 leagues per city, and those 4 leagues are decided by calculating the power of the top 4 registrants. Any other registrants for that city who don't meet those criteria will be pushed down to another city. Some cities are going to have better resources than others. So you're going to see a lot of those top tier leagues sort of jockeying for position in those better cities. And in some cases, that could be a benefit for a newer league to sort of watch which ones have the better resources and maybe choose one that's more mid-tier or even lower tier so that you guarantee yourself a better shot at success. One thing that goes without saying, typically this is the way it works in a lot of these game modes, your champions will be locked at the power that the Guardian Challenge starts. So as soon as Guardian Challenge begins, whatever you've done to your champions, that's the way they're going to look until the end. Even if you back out of Guardian Challenge and provide any upgrades, they're still going to be the same level as when you started. So pretty simple. Just one of those things that I should point out just in case your war room might be upgrading around the time that Guardian Challenge begins. You want to make sure either you try to speed that up or just be aware that you're not going to be able to apply those upgrades and they count in the Guardian Challenge. Now, when you enter into the Guardian Challenge when it begins, all of the spawn points are going to be random. So there are different spots on the map where each league will sort of have a headquarters and you're going to randomly be placed. Sometimes it ends up being advantageous for certain leagues to be closer to different resources. You might be closer to the main city or a couple of the towns that are further away. And so, just one of those things you can't really plan for. You just have to be aware of sort of what your strategy would be based on your positioning on the map. Another thing that people might be curious about when you enter into the Guardian Challenge. So we can back out and I'll show you. So you'll click on this icon and you'll be able to then enter into the city that you're registered for, which looks like we're registered for Bloodhaven. But you'll be able to click into this map and you'll sort of go around the map and do what I'm about to explain to you. But the thing I want to point out here is you can leave Guardian Challenge. You're not going to be pushed out of the match if you leave. You'll be able to re-enter. So you can come and go as you please. You'll be able to do, you see a lot of people, and I'll do this as well, working on their crime network or crisis response. So you can do other things on your account to kind of, I guess, pass the time when you're waiting in between moving your squads around, or if you have any timers that come up, if you run out of stamina on your champions. The last general information I'll say is a decent amount of rewards that you can get from the Guardian Challenge. You're going to get rewards based on your league placement. You're going to get personal rewards, and you're going to get rewards based on whether or not you had the first occupation of the city. So those are going to be pretty big. So a lot of people are jockeying to try to open that city. You'll see when you open up the map, the city's kind of on a cooldown. When that cooldown expires, you want to be the first league to initiate your coordinated assault so that you can take that city. You'll get a decent amount of cubes from Motherbox if you're able to accomplish that. So next, let's talk about resource acquisition. You're going to be able to obtain resources for your league and also for your individual personal contribution as well, based on whether your particular squad or coordinated assault is able to take 3 objectives. So that's going to be your city, that's going to be your towns, and that's going to be your productive buildings. So for the city, you're going to be able to obtain, let's say I'm basing these numbers off of having a full squad of 5, or let's say, full coordinated assault of 5 squads. If you take the city, you're going to get 90 resources per second for taking the city. And then if you have a full squad, you're going to get 75 resources per 10 seconds for those squad members that are participating. So each squad is going to get 15 resources per second individually. And then you'll get I guess for the league total, you're getting 75 points per 10 seconds. And same thing applies for taking the city. Those squads are going to get that 90. For towns, each town that is taken is going to get 30 resources per 10 seconds for that town. And then each individual squad that's in that coordinated assault is going to get a certain amount of points as well. I believe it's going to be 6 points per squad. So those individuals, the individual players are going to get 6 points per 10 seconds for their squad, and that sums up to 30 points total per 10 seconds for that squad or that coordinated assault being at that town. And then finally, any productive building is going to net you 5 points per 10 seconds. So those are sort of something that you want to kind of ambiently or passively be doing while you have downtime. You do want to be aware of stamina, but productive buildings are still a great resource. You want to have a decent amount of your league members doing those productive buildings. And I would also say that some of the more coordinated leagues, what they're going to do is they're going to have squads of people who may not be able to be there for the whole Guardian Challenge, or that may not be as strategy versed, or well versed in strategy, I should say. Those players are probably going to be assigned to say, hey, just go take some productive buildings. Don't worry about anything else. Don't focus on any towns. Don't worry about, those types of things. Maybe you have those folks when they can join other coordinated assaults with their highest power squads, but then use their ship to go out to those productive buildings and just make sure they're constantly gathering resources for your league. So let's talk about movement. Movement is done using a vehicle, and you can travel to an empty tile, you can travel to a city, a town, or a productive building. And you can do this by initiating your own coordinated assault, which will allow you to choose where you want to move, or you can join someone else's coordinated assault with your team. As I may have mentioned, you have to have a vehicle for each squad. So this means that free-to-play players, unfortunately, are going to be quite hampered by this fact, and you'll end up more often than not joining someone else's coordinated assault rather than doing your own, because you're only going to have that one squad available to do so. The next thing I want to talk about is cities and towns. So each city and town is protected by guards. When you first start out in the game, none of the cities or towns are going to be occupied by any league. So those guards are sort of just, I guess, hired mercenaries. But you're going to be able to take over those cities and towns. And when you do so, those guards are going to be your mercenaries. So they will defend the city or town for you. And we talked a little bit about point acquisition. So when you take a city or town, your squad is going to garrison there. And it will be garrisoned there until you pull that squad out. And you'll be able to obtain points over time, every 10 seconds, for leaving your squad in place. And that will also mean that you'll probably have better protection for that city or town. So usually, a lot of the more contested objectives, you always want to make sure that you have a squad there. You never want to leave it unprotected. There are some towns around the map where you kind of just swoop through, you take the town, you go to the next place, especially the ones that are further out. You typically don't want to keep your squad super far away from your base of operations. Now, often you will find yourself down. You'll be losing. Maybe the other team has taken the city. Maybe the other team has taken a lot of the towns, and you're starting to see them accumulate a lot of points. In this case, you may be fighting from an underdog position, and you might have to daisy chain some towns around the map and then come back and try to take the city. When you're doing that, you may be attacking a town, getting that town for your league, and then leaving it to go to the next town. If you do this, which I think is a good strategy, you're going to leave the town slightly unprotected. The guards will still be there, but at a lower power level. So good chance that that town will be taken by another league if someone else on your league isn't able to go down and garrison themselves. The next topic is combat. So combat is done by vehicles. You're not going to be controlling your squad. You're not going to be doing any fighting. This mode is just purely strategic. You're trying to sort of outthink the other league and accumulate as many resources as you can. So combat is initiated when two vehicles meet in a specific location on the grid or on the map. So you might meet, I think it would be highly unlikely that you would meet on a tile, but typically it's going to happen when one squad is defending a city or town or productive building, and another league sends a squad to combat them. So you're going to have sort of an attacker and a defender situation. You're not going to have two ships that collide in the middle of the map and fight each other. It has to be at a specific location. Now, the squad combat is basically whoever has the highest power level is going to end up winning. It's very similar to a lot of other coordinated assaults and things you'll see where you can actually go in while the fight is happening and you can see they're putting power against power, seeing who wins. So obviously it does matter what your power level is of your squads. And, you know, if you have a smaller account, you might be using some of those epic champions or either legendaries that you haven't really developed much. If they're not in level sync, you want to have their levels as high as you can for that reason. Now, I mentioned free-to-play players are going to be at a disadvantage in this game mode, and that's because free-to-play accounts only currently have access to one ship. There is a second ship available. It's called the T-Jet, but it is pay to win. So you get that as part of one of the pack acquisition events where you can purchase, if you purchase certain amounts of gems, you get some points. You're able to obtain Green Lantern and the T-Jet through that, but it does cost a little bit of money to get that. So most people right now who aren't spenders or aren't big spenders are having to deal with just having that one jet. Now, the developers have said that they're going to be releasing a second free-to-play obtainable ship by the end of January. So we're crossing our fingers that's the case and that it is one that's easy to obtain. But until then, you just have to make do with what you have. And typically that means, as I mentioned, you're going to want to utilize your one ship as efficiently as you can, but you also want to be joining other squads to get as many points as you can for your league. Next, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about stamina. So each battle is going to cost your champion's stamina. And those battles will also reduce the attributes of your champion until it basically hits zero. So the more times you're sending your squad out, whether it be with your jets or with someone else's, and doing actions, doing battles in Guardian Challenge, you're going to lose stamina. It's going to hit zero. And then those champions are going to be basically timed out. Effectively, they're going to enter what's called a recuperation state, and this will last for a few minutes. The only way to regenerate stamina is during that recuperation state. So you can't just like leave those champions sitting idle for a little while so that they regenerate the stamina. You actually need to actively be using those champions as much as possible so that you can get them into the recuperation state and get them back and up and running at their highest efficiency as many times as possible. The last item I want to mention is personal points. I mentioned already that you're going to be attacking cities, attacking towns, attacking productive buildings, and your squad is going to be helping to accumulate points, whether you're participating in someone else's squad or running a coordinated assault your own. And you'll end up getting 10 points each time you defeat an enemy in battle. And you'll also get 2 points whenever your coordinated assault defeats an enemy in battle. And what you'll see on the map is a lot of these productive buildings, or all the buildings on the map, there ends up being like 5 squads. So like before a league takes over a building, you will have like 5 sets of guards there. So you end up getting points each time you defeat one of those. So I got a couple of tips for you if you've made it this far in the video. The first thing, the most important thing, is to make sure that you're listening to what your league officers are telling you. Make sure that you're coordinating as a team. It's very important. If your league doesn't have anyone who's kind of stepped up to take the incentive and lead that charge, then maybe that's going to be you. But talk to your leader and try to figure that out. But it's very important to have a little bit of pre-planning for Guardian Challenge and just know kind of what your strategy is going to be. You know, you want to be calling out where you're going next. Once the challenge gets going, you want to be very active in your league chat. You know, hey, we need to go take this city, or we need to take this town. So-and-so go get some productive buildings. Those are vitally important to your success in this challenge. Now, when in doubt, if you're not sure whether to take a certain city or town, or if you feel like it's going to be impossible to take those cities or towns, like they're heavily contested, look for a town on the map that may not be as contested. Check for, look for maybe a league that already realizes that they've lost and they've left, or that didn't show up, and take the towns around that league's home base. That's a good strategy for someone who's not sure what to do, or maybe is a little scared to get involved in the action. You could also just take productive buildings. At the end of the day, always be taking the productive buildings if you're not sure what to do next, or if maybe all of the bigger cities and towns are already being contested by other folks in your league. I think it goes without saying, but the city is the most important node on the map. Almost always, probably always, the league who controls that city is the league that wins the Guardian Challenge. You want to control it as often, as long as you possibly can. And so a lot of your efforts, if you are able to get the city initially, are going to be trying to defend it. And, you'll have to try to work out who's going to be working on that versus going around and continuing to get those towns. One situation you can find yourself in is you've taken the city, but you have none of the towns. So you have to be careful about that, but very important to make sure that you control that city for as long as you can. And I shared this advice earlier in the video, but there's a happy balance between controlling the city versus the towns and kind of knowing when to pivot your strategy. In some cases, you might realize that you keep trying to take the city. The team that's there is just a bunch of whales, and there's basically no way for you to fight against that team until you can get their stamina, out the door. But I think in that case, your strategy would be to shift and try to take all of the towns instead, so that you're, I guess, being able to combat the amount of resources they're getting at that city. If you take all the towns and control them, and you also have some folks trying to get those productive buildings up and running, then you could potentially change the tide of the battle. The last thing I'll say is make sure that you are initiating your coordinated assaults inside the Guardian Challenge event. It can be a little bit confusing, but it's possible if you back out of the Guardian Challenge, if you initiate a coordinated assault there, it's not going to count in the Guardian Challenge. So you want to make sure this is something that also happens in Umbral Rift. So really make sure that you're doing all of your actions within the Guardian Challenge event so that you don't run afoul of those. Ultimately, Guardian Challenge does last for a while, but I've found that a lot of these matches are won within the first 20 to 30 minutes, and then it's just a question of making sure that you keep people in game and focused on continuing to accumulate nodes. You can't rest on your laurels. You do have to sit there for most of the match and continue to accumulate points. But I think often you will find that a couple of leagues will just give up and it's just between two. But just another thing to point out. So I hope this video has been helpful for you. I hope it's a good, at least introductory guide to how the Guardian Challenge works in principle. Let me know how you're preparing for your next Guardian Challenge, and I hope to see you on the Discord or in my next video.